said that voting by mail is an invitation to fraud. Could you lay out and tell us exactly where the evidence is right now that mail-in ballots in Nevada and other states will lead to widespread fraud?
Well, if you read, even the Washington Post had a terrible story on mail-in, and the New York Times, and many newspapers have had terrible stories. You see them all over the internet. They've had some just horrible stories on mail-in ballots. You look at Arizona, you don't even have to have, as you know, they have a provision where they don't have to check signatures. So you sign it and you could have a totally different signature. It's okay. It won't be approved. They have the right to go 7 days after the election for approval. So you're not even going to know who won the state of Nevada.
Oh, you were talking about that. Oh, I just wanted to point out we did call Nevada's Secretary of State's Office Election Division, and the spokeswoman there said that that simply isn't true, Mr. President, and that Nevada will continue to check ballot signatures against voter registration cards. It's done at the county level. Okay,
but that's not what they said when they approved it. They said they're not going to check signatures. They're not going to be able to. And their machinery, which is old, doesn't allow them to. So it's going to be physically impossible for them to do that, especially in a short period of time. In addition, you have the November 3rd election, and they're allowed to count votes until 7 days after the election. So what does that mean? If Nevada, which is a big state and a great state, a state I like very much, and I think we're going to do very well there, are we going to wait a week after November 3rd if it comes down to Nevada, which it could very well? I don't think so. I don't think it's appropriate. So with all of the bundling that you're going to have, with the harvesting you're going to have, with people being sent ballots all over that have maybe nothing to do with the state anymore, it's a terrible thing. In New York, they had the Carolyn Maloney situation, and I criticized it badly over the last 2 years and 2 days. I mean, I gave it some very, very strong criticism, and all of a sudden, like a miracle, they just approved the winner. Well, what happened? Did the person that was second concede the race, even though it was very close and all mixed up? They have a terrible situation in New York with the ballots, you know that. And as soon as I said, well, I think you should have a new election, because the election, obviously, they're not going to know what to do. I think you should have a new election. They all of a sudden announced a winner. I assume it was her, but they announced a winner. Well, I don't agree with it. Did somebody speak to the person on the other side, the opponent? Did they do something for the opponent on the other side? Take a look at Paterson, New Jersey. Take a look at many things. It's all over newspapers what's going on with the mail-in ballots. They send out millions of ballots. They're totally unprepared to do it. And then they come back in the millions. It's going to be a disaster. I'm doing our country a big favor by bringing it up. And, you know, from a common standpoint, even common sense standpoint, if you look at it just out of common sense and pure, basic, beautiful intelligence, you know it can't work. Now, Florida's worked very hard for years and years on developing a system, and I'm sure they probably have problems also. But absentee ballots are different than mail-in ballots, what you call universal mail-in ballots. Are much different. You have to apply for it. You have to do different things, and it's a much better system, and it's a system that can be reasonably accurate. But there's no system like going to the poll and voting. So I would like to find out why all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in the midst of all of this grief, why is it that they approved the New York race? While you asked that question,
race, sir, there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud.
Which one?
There.
Oh, really? Well, then you're reading a different newspaper than.